It's an enormous pleasure to be on a platform with two of my colleagues. I've worked with both Myung and Suba in different international AIDS organisations, and I feel very honoured to be standing here on a platform with them. I actually can't access my overheads, so maybe somebody can come and show me what to do, but let me say right at the beginning that I want to acknowledge our Korean friends and colleagues who, against a lot of difficulty, were able to create a conference. And I want us to all remember that when we go home, they stay here and they have to work with the consequences of what has been a difficult few days for all of us. And I think it is enormously important that we do not forget the struggles in this country when we get on our plane tonight or tomorrow, and that we remember also that this ICAP only happened because of the dedication of a small number of people in Korea who were determined to have a conference that would help raise the agenda not just of HIV but also of human rights and of the position of vulnerable people in Korea. Thank you. Now, what I want to do, and I can do this without PowerPoint, is I really wanted to create a framework which I think works well for the three speeches that will follow. I want to reflect on the way in which we have created a quite remarkable global response to the epidemic over the past 25 years, but also to indicate that the nature of the world is changing rapidly. And as it changes rapidly, we cannot assume that our achievements globally will remain. I think we have to be very tough-minded and analytic in understanding that globally the commitment to HIV/AIDS is declining at a time when the need for resources is increasing, and that requires new political strategies and new thought on our part. And in particular, it requires us to find ways of talking to people who are not at our conferences, who are not part of the AIDS world, and who do not share our belief that there are clear and obvious issues and ways of dealing with them. And I want to end, and I hope the PowerPoint works by then, because I want to pose a few questions for us all to think about. But let me just start by reminding us of the quite remarkable combination of community organisation, mobilisation of affected and infected people, researchers and leaders of some international organisations who together put this new disease and a new epidemic onto the global agenda. And remind us that their achievements were quite extraordinary. HIV was the first health issue to go to the Security Council. It became the subject of a number of special sessions of the United Nations General Assembly. It was instrumental in the creation of the Global Fund, which now provides funding not just for AIDS but also for TB and malaria. And the framing of a global commitment to fight inequality and poverty, the Millennium Development Goals, which were established or endorsed in 2000, quite specifically set targets around HIV. Now, I don't want to spend much time talking about the targets. What I want to remind us all is that the Millennium Development Goals come to an end in 2015. There is no guarantee that whatever replaces them will actually include HIV and AIDS. But as I say, there is a huge issue that we need to be thinking about, which is in a post-Millennium Development Goal world, within 4 years, how do we ensure that HIV remains a stated goal of international development? And I think that we have to recognise that in the last decade, the first 10 years of this century, a number of factors came together that led to a massive infusion of funds into the epidemic, which meant that an unprecedented amount of donor interest and donor funding was available. We all know that despite everything else we might feel about President Bush, one of the few areas in which the United States put extraordinary resources and energy was HIV/AIDS. In fact, the United States remains responsible through both public and private funding for over half of all global funding that goes towards the epidemic. We know that the G8, at their meeting in Gleneagles, made commitments to eradicate poverty with a strong interest in HIV/AIDS. But we also know that there is a growing donor weariness and that it is likely over the next few years that we will see, as I said, funding decline as needs increase. Now, this is happening in a world in which a quite different global architecture is being created. I refer to... Can people now see? Yeah. I refer here to BRICSARM. BRICSARM is the latest one of a number of acronyms that are used to basically sum up the various groups that bring together the new powers in a changing world. In this case, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa and Mexico. In this part of the world, we would of course want to include Indonesia. In other contexts, we might talk about Turkey. The reality is that the old global architecture that led to major promises by the G8 nations is evolving very quickly. And we, as an AIDS movement, need to be aware of this, we need to think about this, we need to analyse it. And we're not doing that. And we also need to recognise that there are new donors who do not accept the paradigm that most people in this room have worked with, namely the connection between health and human rights. And that in the old donor countries, there is increasing scepticism about development assistance. And I know, even in my own country, which is committed to increasing quite considerably its development assistance, there are strong political forces arguing against that. And that is much more so in other rich countries where there are major economic problems.